What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? Evelyn stared down at the unopened mail, the thin paper crinkling faintly under her fingers like the brittle remnants of a life once vibrant but now worn and faded. At 67, the walls of her small kitchen seemed to close in tighter every day, shadows pooling in the corners where laughter used to live. The doctor's letter she held in her hand was blunt, her heart wasn't what it used to be, and if she didn't slow down, she risked much worse. The thought settled over her like a lead blanket. She thought about the conversations with her daughter, how they'd become fewer, colder, like fragments of a forgotten language. Her son, busy with his own life, rarely called. Friends were distant memories, their names and faces blurring like photographs left too long in the sun. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as the loneliness swelled. Was this all that remained after a lifetime of hope, hard work, and sacrifice? The kitchen clock ticked on, a steady reminder that time was relentless, and she was slipping further into the quiet shadows where people stopped noticing. The TV hummed softly in the background, a news channel running a special on innovation. A flash caught her eye, Elon Musk's name, bold on the screen, promising to reshape the future with rockets, electric cars, and dreams too big to ignore. Curious, Evelyn reached for the remote and tuned in. Musk's voice filled the room, steady, unapologetic, fearless. When something is important enough, he said, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. The word struck her like a sudden gust of wind through a closed window, stirring the stale air inside her. Was it really too late? Could she still matter? Her heart quickened. She thought of all the times she had felt dismissed, by doctors, by her family, by herself. The "too old" whisper that followed her everywhere. But here was a man who defied every expectation, who refused to let limitations define his purpose. She felt a flicker deep within, a small spark of something long dormant. With trembling hands, Evelyn pulled out her phone and typed a message she hadn't sent in years, "I'm still here." As she hit send, a strange blend of fear and hope washed over her. Could this be the moment everything changed? Could she rewrite the story that said her best days were behind her? The question hung in the air, unanswered but alive. She smiled faintly and whispered, "What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" If you're watching this story, wherever you are, hit subscribe and leave a comment with your answer. Maybe this is the spark you needed, too. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Evelyn's life had once been filled with colors brighter than the fading paint on the walls of her small-town home. She remembered the day she opened her first gallery show, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the hum of excited voices, the way the sunlight had spilled through the windows onto canvases bursting with hope and dreams. At 35, she was a rising star in the local art world, a woman with bold ideas and a heart full of possibility. But life had other plans. Marriage, children, responsibilities, each a beautiful thread woven tightly into her days until the artist inside her began to unravel, hidden beneath years of routines and sacrifice. Her husband, Tom, had been her partner in everything once, but time had worn at their bond, fraying the edges until silence filled their rooms more than laughter. When he passed away 5 years ago, the emptiness he left behind wasn't just grief, it was a stark reminder of how fleeting moments truly were. Her children had grown distant, busy with their own lives and families, their calls infrequent and brief. The fight with her daughter, Sarah, years ago over something now forgotten, had left a scar that neither had dared to heal. Regrets piled up like old letters in the drawer, things left unsaid, chances never taken, bridges burned. The weight of those memories pressed on her chest every morning as she sat by the window watching the world move on without her. The house was filled with echoes of a vibrant past, the worn easel in the corner, dusty paint tubes, sketches of landscapes and faces she had once loved to bring to life. She touched a faded photo of her younger self holding a brush, eyes bright with dreams, and a pang of loss twisted inside her. Could that woman still be inside her, waiting for a second chance? Yet the years had been cruel. Her body no longer obeyed with the same strength. Arthritis gnawed at her fingers, making even the simplest strokes on canvas painful. The morning stiffness in her joints was a reminder that time had claimed more than just her youth. She felt invisible in a world obsessed with youth and speed, as if her experiences, wisdom, and stories were just forgotten relics gathering dust. Friends who once gathered at her kitchen table had dwindled to a handful, some passed on, others lost in their own struggles. Loneliness had settled in like an unwelcome guest, and she often found herself talking to the walls or the quiet kitchen clock just to fill the silence. But even in the quiet, Evelyn carried a secret fire, a longing to reconnect with the person she once was and maybe become someone new. One memory haunted her, the day of her first gallery show. She had been nervous and proud, standing among admirers, her paintings celebrated. Her father had been there, smiling with tears in his eyes. That moment felt like a lifetime ago, a symbol of everything she had lost but also everything she could regain. The contrast was painful, then, the world full of promise, now, a landscape shadowed by fear and doubt. Yet that memory was a beacon, a reminder that she was more than her years, more than her aches and losses. It was a seed of hope buried beneath the weight of time. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she traced the edges of a blank canvas on her dusty worktable. The blankness both terrified and beckoned her, an empty page for a story yet to be written, a chance to reclaim her voice. But fear was a constant companion. Was it foolish to dream again? Would anyone even care? Was she just a relic now, too old to change? Her mind wandered to Sarah, to the last bitter conversation they had. The words still stung, accusations, misunderstandings, the stubborn silence that followed. She longed to reach out but didn't know how to bridge the chasm. The thought of reconnecting both terrified and comforted her. Would forgiveness be possible? Could love still bloom after years of neglect? The weight of isolation settled heavily, but beneath it, a quiet resolve began to form. Evelyn realized that maybe the biggest barrier was not outside but within herself, the fear that she no longer mattered, that her story had ended. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of defiance stirred, sparked by memories of a younger self who dared to dream and a chance encounter with words that challenged her beliefs. Life before the shift had been a tapestry of love, loss, hope, and regret, a complex, messy, beautiful story that had shaped her but no longer defined her. The question remained, was there still time to write a new chapter? That question lingered as Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the ache and the spark intertwined. The past was a shadow, but the future was hers to shape, if only she could find the courage to reach out, to try, to believe again. Evelyn woke that morning with a heaviness pressing on her chest, as if invisible hands were squeezing the last bits of hope from her soul. The fight inside her raged quietly but fiercely. Was it really too late? Her mind echoed with doubts she'd heard too often, too old, too tired, too forgotten. The doctor's voice from yesterday played on repeat, "You need to slow down, Evelyn. Your heart can't take the strain." She felt the weight of those words crushing her dreams like a slow-moving avalanche. Yet beneath the crushing doubt, a stubborn ember flickered. What if I'm not done yet, she thought, gripping the edge of her kitchen table until her knuckles whitened. But the voices of others, her children's gentle, yet firm reminders to take it easy, the quiet dismissals from friends who no longer understood her restlessness, even the cold, judgmental looks from strangers who saw her as just another old woman, crowded her mind, pulling her back into the shadows. The internal war between surrender and fight was relentless. She wrestled with herself over breakfast, staring at her untouched coffee, questioning whether she had the strength to break free from the invisible cage time had locked her in. Was anyone even watching? Did her story still matter to anyone? In the silence, she found a refuge in her phone, scrolling through endless news clips and podcasts. Then, unexpectedly, a headline stopped her thumb: Elon Musk, the only thing that matters is fearlessness. She pressed play, and his voice filled her small living room, a man who refused to bow to odds, who had risked everything over and over, who built rockets that soared higher than anyone thought possible. His words were not about youth or fame, they were about persistence, courage, and relentless curiosity. Don't listen to those who say you can't. When something is important enough, you just do it, Musk said, a spark catching fire in Evelyn's heart. She felt a surge of rebellion rising against the whispers of age and decline. Yet, just as hope crept in, reality struck hard. The familiar sharp pain in her ankle from a misstep during her morning walk flared up, forcing her to hobble back inside. The injury was a harsh reminder that her body was fragile, that setbacks were real. The crushing doubt returned like a storm. Maybe Musk is right for him, but not for me, she thought bitterly. The internal war escalated, hope clashed with fear, desire battled with resignation. At moments, she considered giving up altogether, retreating back into the safety of invisibility. But then she remembered the photo of her younger self at the gallery, the woman who dared to dream big and live boldly. That image was her talisman against despair. She thought about her daughter Sarah and the years of silence between them, the ache of unresolved pain. Evelyn realized that her fight wasn't just about reclaiming a lost dream, it was about reclaiming herself, her worth, her voice, her future. The war wasn't external alone, it was a battle within her own soul. Her children's skepticism weighed heavily. Sarah had told her on the phone just last week, "Mom, you need to accept things as they are. You can't change the past, and your health isn't what it used to be." The words stung but also felt like a challenge, a test of her resolve. Could she prove that age was not a cage but a frontier? That purpose could be rediscovered, even when the world had stopped noticing. She found herself searching online for communities of people her age who were pushing boundaries, breaking stereotypes. Stories of seniors who had started businesses, learned new skills, traveled, and loved again gave her small, flickering lights in the darkness. Musk's presence was a thread woven through these stories, a symbol of radical thinking, fearless defiance against limits, and relentless pursuit of what seemed impossible. Evelyn realized that Elon wasn't just a billionaire visionary, he was a metaphor for courage and reinvention. She began to write in her journal that night, spilling the chaotic tangle of doubts and hopes onto the page. Is it too late? Does anyone care? What's the point? She wrote, questions that had plagued her for years. Then she added beneath them, but what if it's not? What if the point is now? The act of writing felt like a small rebellion, a refusal to be silenced by time. But just as the fire inside her grew, the world around her tested her again. A neighbor stopped by unannounced, commenting on how she should take it easy and not push herself too hard. The subtle pity in the neighbor's eyes was a cold slap, a reminder of how society often viewed those over 65, as fragile, obsolete, irrelevant. Evelyn felt the old familiar urge to shrink away, to disappear. But instead, she smiled politely and said, "Maybe pushing is exactly what I need." That small act of defiance was like stepping onto a new battlefield, where every step forward would be a victory against invisibility and fear. Over the next days, the war inside her didn't ease. There were moments of crushing loneliness, nights when tears came unbidden, when the pain in her body was a cruel echo of the pain in her heart. Yet, beneath it all, the words of Elon Musk echoed louder. Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. Could she innovate her life, even now? Could she take small risks that would lead to transformation? The idea terrified and thrilled her. Evelyn began to imagine small steps, a daily walk, a blog where she could share her thoughts, maybe even dusting off her paintbrushes to create something new. These ideas were fragile seedlings, vulnerable to doubt and fear, but alive nonetheless. She realized that the inner war was not something to be won all at once, but a series of battles fought day by day, moment by moment. As she lay in bed, the house silent except for the slow rhythm of her breath, Evelyn made a quiet promise to herself. To keep fighting, to keep hoping, to keep daring, even when the world told her she was too old to change. This war was hers, and though the odds felt impossible, so had the rockets that Elon Musk launched into the sky. If he could reach for the stars, maybe she could reach for something too, a new life, a new purpose, a new story waiting to be written. The dawn would come, and with it, the chance to fight again. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, the morning sun casting long shadows over the unopened mail and dusty art supplies. The pain in her ankle had finally eased enough for her to consider stepping outside again, though the fear of falling lingered like a ghost. She had spent so many years retreating into the quiet safety of her home, convinced that the world had no place left for her. But Elon Musk's words, the ones that refused to leave her mind, whispered a challenge: when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. What if the one thing she needed to change was simply to start moving? Movement was not just physical, it was symbolic, a small rebellion against the stillness that had swallowed her life. She pulled on her old sneakers, worn at the edges but still sturdy, and stepped outside. The cool morning air kissed her skin, and the neighborhood was waking slowly, birds calling in the trees, leaves rustling in the soft breeze. Each step was tentative at first, unsure, as if her body was remembering how to live again. But with every footfall, a flicker of something new stirred, a feeling of courage, of hope, of possibility. Evelyn began to walk a little farther each day, marking her progress with notes in a worn journal she'd pulled from the bottom drawer. Day 1, shaky steps, heart pounding, she wrote. Day 3, the pain is less, but the fear is louder. The neighborhood noticed. Neighbors who had once glanced away now nodded greetings or stopped to ask how she was doing. A small connection, but powerful enough to remind her she wasn't invisible. The walks became a ritual, a sacred time when she reclaimed space in a world that had pushed her aside. Walking also brought memories rushing back. Her younger self running through fields with wild abandon, the exhilaration of chasing dreams without fear. It was as if every step was washing away years of doubt and regret. Inspired by Elon Musk's example of relentless experimentation, Evelyn decided to do more than just walk. She would rebuild a part of herself that had lain dormant, the artist within. Dusting off her old paints and brushes felt like opening a door she hadn't realized was still unlocked. At first, the strokes were clumsy, her hands trembling with disuse and pain, but the act itself was liberating. She painted not for galleries or critics but for herself, each brushstroke a declaration: I am still here. The small acts of change began to ripple outward. Encouraged by a blog she found online featuring stories of seniors reinventing themselves, Evelyn created her own simple blog. She called it Second Acts and shared snippets of her journey, the daily walks, the early morning paintings, the battles with fear. The first few days, no one responded, but she kept writing, fueled by the belief that maybe, just maybe, someone out there needed to hear her voice. Then, a message popped up, an old friend from her youth, Clara, who had moved away decades ago. Clara's note was brief but filled with warmth: so glad to see you're still chasing your dreams. Let's catch up. The connection sparked a warmth Evelyn hadn't felt in years. It reminded her that she was not alone, that her story mattered. Even more surprising was a comment from Sarah, her daughter, on one of the posts. It was hesitant and brief: Mom, I'm proud of you. Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. The words were more than she had dared hope for. The choice to walk, to paint, to share was small, almost insignificant to an outsider, but to Evelyn it was revolutionary. It was a break from the narrative that she was too old, too broken, too invisible to change. That small change reignited a purpose that had lain dormant beneath years of doubt. But it was not an easy road. Some days the pain in her body reminded her of its limits, other days the silence from the world outside pressed down heavy. Yet each time she faltered, she remembered Elon's words: failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. She began to see her journey as a series of experiments: some would fail, some would succeed, but every step was forward. Evelyn's world was expanding, slowly but surely. The small neighborhood walks grew into longer explorations of the nearby park where children played and dogs chased sticks. She noticed things she had missed for years: the scent of pine, the warmth of sunlight on her face, the laughter of strangers. The world was still vibrant, still full of life, and maybe she belonged in it after all. Her blog gained a modest following, mostly other seniors who left comments sharing their own struggles and hopes. This new community, digital and distant but real, gave Evelyn strength. She began to realize she was not just surviving, she was beginning to live again. One afternoon, while painting on her small porch, she received a phone call. It was Sarah. The voice on the other end was tentative but sincere. "Mom, I saw your blog. I want to talk." Evelyn's heart pounded, a mixture of fear and joy flooding her senses. The choice to pick up the phone was as bold as any step she'd taken that day. They talked for hours, tentatively peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. It was messy, fragile, but real. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt the walls between her and her daughter soften. The moment was victory mixed with vulnerability, a breakthrough that promised more battles but also hope. Evelyn knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The small changes, the walks, the paintings, the blog, the call, had broken through years of silence and despair. She felt a quiet power growing within her, a strength that came not from youth or ease, but from courage, persistence, and the refusal to be forgotten. She wasn't just surviving, she was transforming. The moment she had feared most, the moment when she believed she was too old to matter, was becoming the moment everything changed. The new legacy she was beginning to build was not about fame or fortune but about reclaiming her voice and inspiring others who felt lost and invisible. Evelyn whispered to herself, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And now, that permission was hers to give. Evelyn never imagined her little blog, started on a whim to share her tentative steps forward, would become a beacon not only for herself but for others who had long felt invisible. The first signs came subtly, a comment here, a message there, voices from all corners of the country, sometimes even from strangers abroad, sharing their stories of struggle, hope, and rediscovery. Each word was a thread weaving her into a new community, one that valued courage over age, possibility over defeat. One evening, as she sat in her quiet living room surrounded by half-finished paintings and the soft glow of her laptop screen, Evelyn read a message that caught her breath. "Your story changed how I see myself. Thank you for reminding me it's never too late." Tears blurred her vision. For years, Evelyn had felt like a ghost drifting through her own life, but now she was seen, heard, and valued. The power of that realization was overwhelming. Encouraged by the support, Evelyn began to share more, her fears, her failures, her small victories. She wrote about the long conversations with Sarah, the ache of rekindling a relationship after years of silence, the frustration of slow progress, and the exhilaration of each step forward. Her vulnerability was raw and real, drawing readers closer. One post in particular, titled "The Moment I Decided to Fight Back," went viral within their small online community. Evelyn described in vivid detail the day she first stepped outside after months of isolation, the trembling in her legs, the battle between fear and hope. She wrote about the pain and the joy, the uncertainty and the courage that sparked her journey. Readers connected deeply, leaving messages filled with empathy and encouragement. The unexpected attention brought new challenges. Omion out there needed to hear her voice. Then, a message popped up, an old friend from her youth, Clara, who had moved away decades ago. Clara's note was brief but filled with warmth. "So glad to see you're still chasing your dreams. Let's catch up." The connection sparked a warmth Evelyn hadn't felt in years. It reminded her that she was not alone, that her story mattered. Even more surprising was a comment from Sarah, her daughter, on one of the posts. Some commenters expressed skepticism, telling her she was too old to change or that her story was an exception, not the rule. These voices stirred the old doubts, threatening to undo the fragile confidence she'd built. But Evelyn reminded herself of Elon Musk's relentless spirit, the idea that failure was part of innovation, that courage meant pressing on even when the world doubts you. The clashing voices became part of her inner war, but she learned to hold fast to the thread of hope. Then, one morning, a reporter from a local newspaper reached out, interested in featuring her story. Evelyn hesitated but accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to amplify the message for those still trapped in silence and fear. The interview was nerve-wracking but also exhilarating. As she recounted her journey, the loneliness, the pain, the spark of change inspired by a distant visionary named Elon Musk, Evelyn felt a shift inside her. She was no longer just a woman reclaiming her life. She was a symbol of resilience and possibility for others. The article ran with the headline, "At 67, Evelyn's new chapter inspires a generation." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages flooded her inbox, some from people she had never met, thanking her for giving them hope. The sudden spotlight was both thrilling and intimidating. Evelyn found herself juggling her own doubts alongside newfound responsibilities as a mentor and inspiration. The phone call she'd long awaited finally came from Sarah, and this time it led to visits filled with laughter, tears, and the slow rebuilding of trust. The fractures of the past remained, but so did the willingness to heal. Evelyn's art, once abandoned, began to find new purpose. She held a small exhibition at the local library, featuring paintings that told stories of struggle, hope, and transformation. The event was modest, but to Evelyn, it was a triumph, a celebration of life reclaimed. As she stood by her paintings, watching visitors pause and connect, she felt the truth settle deep inside: she was no longer invisible. The journey had been messy and painful, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, but breaking through meant embracing vulnerability as strength. Evelyn's story became a quiet revolution in her town, inspiring others to take bold steps toward their own second acts. The new legacy she was building was not about fame or wealth but about showing that life after 65 could be vibrant, meaningful, and full of possibility. The words that had sparked her transformation echoed in her mind: "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And now, having given herself that permission, Evelyn was determined to live fully, fiercely, and with the kind of hope that could light the darkest nights. Evelyn sat quietly on her porch, the evening breeze carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple that seemed almost too beautiful for words. She gazed out at the familiar street, the houses bathed in soft light, neighbors chatting softly as they closed their day. It was a scene she had once felt completely disconnected from, as if she were merely a shadow slipping past life's moments. But now, the weight of that disconnection was lifting, replaced by a deep and unexpected peace. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the years of loneliness, the bitter regrets, the moments when she felt invisible and defeated. It all seemed so distant now, like a different lifetime. The moment she had feared so much, the moment she thought it was too late, had turned out to be the beginning of everything. Evelyn understood now that the story she had lived was not defined by age or loss but by the courage to change, even when change seemed impossible. Her life had become a testament to the truth she had discovered, that it's never too late to rewrite your story. The legacy she was leaving behind was not one of grand monuments or famous achievements but a quieter, more powerful kind of inheritance. It was the legacy of hope, resilience, and the refusal to be sidelined by time. Evelyn thought of Sarah, now a frequent visitor and partner in small projects that brought both of them joy. The fragile bond they were rebuilding was a living proof that healing was possible, no matter how deep the scars. Evelyn's art had become a language through which she expressed the full spectrum of her experience: the pain, the beauty, the transformation. Her paintings adorned the walls of friends, neighbors, and even strangers who found in them a mirror of their own struggles and triumphs. The blog, which had started as a quiet whisper, now echoed with the voices of hundreds, even thousands, of people who had found courage in her words. Her story had sparked a movement of second chances and new beginnings among seniors feeling forgotten or stuck. More than once, Evelyn thought about Elon Musk, the man whose words had lit the first spark inside her. She never met him, but he had become a symbol of radical possibility, a reminder that boundaries were meant to be challenged. In her journal, she wrote, He showed me that fearlessness isn't the absence of fear but the decision that something else is more important. Evelyn realized that her true transformation was not about defying age but embracing her full humanity, with all its fragility and strength. She remembered the nights spent wrestling with doubt and the days when her body reminded her of its limits. And yet, through it all, she had kept moving forward, one small step at a time. Now, as she looked toward the future, she knew her mission was clear: to inspire others who felt trapped by the stories society told about growing old. She began organizing small workshops at the community center, where seniors could come together to share their dreams and fears, to create, to learn, and to connect. These gatherings were filled with laughter, tears, and the palpable energy of rediscovered purpose. Evelyn listened as people shared stories of lost opportunities, hidden talents, and desires rekindled. Each person who left those rooms carried with them a spark, ready to ignite their own new beginning. One afternoon, a young reporter asked Evelyn what advice she would give to someone who felt too old to change. Without hesitation, she replied, "You are never too old. You are only too silent. Speak up, take one small step, and keep going. Your story isn't finished yet." The response to her workshops and blog continued to grow, reaching beyond her town to inspire people nationwide. Evelyn received letters from seniors who had started writing, painting, volunteering, or reconnecting with loved ones because her story showed them it was possible. She was often humbled by the impact she had made, but she never lost sight of the fact that her own journey was far from over. There were still moments of vulnerability, days when the old fears crept back. But Evelyn had learned to face them with compassion and courage. She understood that transformation was not a destination but a lifelong process. One chilly morning, Evelyn visited the cemetery where her late husband was buried. The wind whispered through the trees as she stood beside the gravestone, her heart heavy with memories. She placed a hand on the cold marble and whispered, "I'm still here, still fighting, still living." The moment was bittersweet, a closure to some chapters and the opening of others. She realized that carrying the past was part of her strength, not a burden to be cast off. Life's pain and joy were woven together, and she could hold them both. Back home, Evelyn settled into her favorite chair with a cup of tea and her journal. She wrote a letter, not to anyone in particular, but to herself and to anyone who might read it someday. "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again. And now I know that permission comes from within." We all have the power to change our stories, no matter our age or circumstance. The only thing that matters is the courage to start. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Evelyn felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her life was not perfect, but it was real and full of meaning. The fire that Elon Musk's words had ignited within her now burned steadily, a guiding light not just for herself but for everyone who dared to believe in second chances. The legacy she would leave was not a monument in stone but a living flame, one that would continue to inspire courage, hope, and transformation long after she was gone. Evelyn closed her journal, smiled softly, and whispered into the quiet night, "This is only the beginning." Evelyn woke before dawn, the house wrapped in silence except for the faint hum of early morning birdsong outside her window. She felt a flutter of anticipation, something she hadn't experienced in years. The days of fear and hesitation were slowly giving way to something bolder, something alive. Today marked a new step, not just in distance but in mindset. After months of walking, blogging, painting, and rebuilding fragile bridges with Sarah, Evelyn decided to push her boundaries further. She would take a short trip to a nearby city, a place bustling with energy and possibilities she had long believed were reserved for the young. Packing her bag was a challenge, both physically and mentally. She carefully folded her clothes, double-checked her medications, and scribbled notes about her itinerary. The thought of navigating unfamiliar streets was intimidating, but the spark Elon Musk had lit in her heart wouldn't be dimmed by doubt. The journey began with a train ride, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks a comforting backdrop to her swirling thoughts. She watched the scenery blur past, fields, small towns, highways, and felt a profound sense of connection to the world beyond her quiet neighborhood. At the station, Evelyn felt a wave of nervous energy as she stepped onto the bustling platform. Faces rushed past, conversations buzzed, and the city's pulse throbbed around her. It was overwhelming and exhilarating. Her first destination was a community art workshop she had discovered online, led by a young artist known for encouraging seniors to explore new creative paths. Walking through the doors, Evelyn felt a mixture of apprehension and excitement. The room was bright and filled with canvases, brushes, and colorful paints. Around her, people of all ages laughed, shared stories, and created. The young artist welcomed her warmly, sensing the courage it took for Evelyn to show up. Over the next few hours, Evelyn lost herself in painting, the brush gliding over the canvas as she poured her emotions into every stroke. The energy of the group, the shared vulnerability, and the freedom to create without judgment stirred something deep inside her. She realized this was more than a hobby, it was a reclamation of her voice and spirit. That night, she wandered through the city streets bathed in neon lights and the hum of life. She felt connected, to the energy around her, to the people she passed, and most importantly, to herself. The trip was more than a physical journey, it was a declaration that her life was not confined by age or circumstance. Evelyn spent the next few days exploring museums, parks, and small cafes, each experience filling her with renewed wonder and possibility. She met other seniors who, like her, were choosing to rewrite their stories. Their conversations were filled with laughter, wisdom, and shared determination to live fully. She returned home tired but invigorated, carrying souvenirs not just in her bag but in her heart, a collection of memories, friendships, and the knowledge that she could still embrace the unknown. Inspired by the trip, Evelyn expanded her blog to include travel stories and reflections on stepping outside comfort zones. Readers responded with enthusiasm, sharing their own dreams of adventure and growth. Her community grew stronger, bonded by the shared courage to face life's challenges head-on. Evelyn also began volunteering at the local senior center, organizing outings and creative workshops, helping others discover new horizons of their own. She saw firsthand how a small spark, like her own journey, could ignite hope and transformation in others. The road was not without obstacles. There were days when her body ached, when loneliness crept back, or when doubts whispered that she should slow down. But Evelyn had learned to face these moments with patience and grace, drawing strength from the resilience she had cultivated. She understood now that living fully meant embracing both the light and the shadows. One afternoon, as she guided a group painting session, a woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "You've given me permission to dream again," she said softly. Evelyn smiled, recognizing the power of shared courage and the ripple effect of one person's breakthrough. In that moment, Evelyn felt the full circle of her transformation. The loneliness that once consumed her was now replaced by connection, purpose, and a new legacy. Her life was no longer defined by what she had lost but by the horizons she was still exploring. She whispered a quiet thanks to the spark that had changed everything, a spark that began with a simple belief that it was never too late to start again. Even as Evelyn embraced new horizons and the warmth of connection, the shadows of doubt and fear still lingered, lurking at the edges of her days. The journey of transformation, she learned, was not a straight path but a winding road with unexpected bends. One chilly morning, as gray clouds gathered overhead, Evelyn awoke with a heaviness in her chest. Memories she had carefully tucked away surged forth, the quiet nights alone, the fractured years with Sarah, the echo of her late husband's absence. For a moment, the weight threatened to pull her under. She hesitated before getting out of bed, the old voice whispering that maybe she was too tired, too broken to keep going. But then, as if summoned by the quiet desperation, a notification popped up on her phone, a new message from a reader of her blog. "Your story helped me fight through my darkest days. Don't give up." The words felt like a lifeline, a reminder that even in her moments of vulnerability, she was not alone. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold beside her journal. She wrote honestly about her struggle with shadows, about how fear and sadness were part of the human experience, not signs of failure. Her words were raw and real, opening a door for others to do the same. In the days that followed, Evelyn found herself drawn back into conversations with her community, both online and in person, where people shared not only their triumphs but also their fears and setbacks. She realized that true courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to face it head-on. One afternoon, Evelyn met with Dr. Martin, a geriatrician who had been skeptical of her sudden burst of activity and change. He had told her to slow down and warned of the risks of pushing too hard. This time, however, their conversation was different. Evelyn spoke with confidence and honesty about her journey, about the purpose that fueled her steps, and about the importance of mental and emotional health alongside physical well-being. Dr. Martin listened, and though cautious, he acknowledged the power of hope and purpose in healing. Their dialogue became a symbol of the balance Evelyn was striving to maintain, between honoring her body's limits and challenging the limitations imposed by age and doubt. As autumn leaves began to fall, Evelyn faced another test. A sudden bout of illness forced her to slow down, to confront her vulnerability in a way she hadn't before. The frustration was immense, the fear of losing momentum threatening to overwhelm her. But during those long, quiet days, she found solace in reflection and gratitude. She revisited the words of Elon Musk, who had spoken often about resilience, not as a linear climb but as a series of falls and rises. Evelyn embraced this truth. Healing was a process, and setbacks were part of growth. She reached out to Sarah during this time, sharing her fears and weaknesses openly. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond past grievances into a space of mutual understanding and forgiveness. Evelyn realized that facing the shadows also meant inviting others into the light, allowing love and connection to mend old wounds. Slowly, strength returned. Evelyn's steps grew steadier, her spirit more grounded. She returned to her blog, this time writing a post titled, "Facing the Shadows, Why Vulnerability is Strength." The response was overwhelming. Readers shared their own stories of struggle and hope, creating a community woven from honesty and compassion. Evelyn's transformation was no longer just about breaking through but about embracing the full spectrum of human experience. The journey was imperfect, messy, and beautiful. One evening, as she sat by the window watching the stars emerge, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. The shadows had not vanished, but they no longer held power over her. She had learned to live with them, to acknowledge fear and sadness without surrendering to them. Her legacy was growing, not in spite of the shadows but alongside them, illuminated by the courage to face each day fully. The spark Elon Musk had ignited within her was no longer a fleeting flame but a steady fire, guiding her through darkness and light alike. Evelyn whispered into the quiet night, "This is life, complex, fragile, and worth every moment." And with that, she embraced the new day with open arms and a fearless heart. Evelyn sat by the window of her small but cozy living room, watching the sunlight filter through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn hardwood floor. It was a quiet morning, but inside her heart, a storm of emotions brewed. The tentative progress she'd made with Sarah, her daughter, had opened a door she once thought permanently shut. Years of silence and distance had created a chasm, but now, with careful steps and renewed hope, Evelyn was determined to cross it. Their first phone call after years had been awkward, filled with pauses and hesitant words, but it was a beginning. Since then, their conversations had grown longer, more comfortable, and tinged with laughter, a balm to wounds that time alone couldn't heal. Evelyn remembered the day she decided to reach out, inspired by the same restless courage that had propelled her into the world beyond her comfort zone. Sitting in her favorite chair, she had drafted a letter full of honesty and vulnerability, admitting her regrets and her longing to rebuild their relationship. The letter was sent with trembling hands and a heart full of hope and fear. When Sarah replied, the message was cautious but open, and that fragile thread of connection began to weave them back together. Their meetings were still tentative. The first visit to Sarah's home felt like walking on glass, every word carefully measured, every silence heavy with unspoken feelings. But beneath the surface, a fragile warmth blossomed. Evelyn realized that rebuilding trust would take time, patience, and grace. She focused on listening, on being present without judgment or expectation. She shared stories of her recent adventures, her art, and her blog, inviting Sarah into the world she was creating anew. Sarah, in turn, spoke of her own struggles, the pressure of work, the loneliness she often hid, and the guilt she carried for years of silence. As the walls between them softened, Evelyn felt a profound sense of healing. Their bond was no longer defined by past hurts but by the possibility of a future rebuilt on mutual respect and love. One afternoon, Evelyn invited Sarah to the community art workshop she had helped organize. Walking into the bright, lively room filled with canvases and laughter, Sarah's eyes sparkled with curiosity and something like relief. They painted side by side, the silence between them filled with the unspoken language of shared creation. Evelyn realized that art was not just a personal refuge but a bridge between hearts. Their relationship deepened, marked by small but meaningful moments. Shared meals, phone calls to check in, and the comfort of presence. Evelyn learned to cherish these imperfect, precious connections. She also reconnected with old friends, people she had lost touch with during years of isolation. Each reunion was a testament to the power of courage and persistence. Evelyn found that opening her heart allowed others to do the same, creating a network of support and love that buoyed her through challenges. At the same time, Evelyn faced moments of doubt. The fear that the past would overshadow the present sometimes crept in, whispering that she wasn't worthy of forgiveness or happiness. But each time, she turned to the spark that had changed her, the belief that transformation was always possible, that healing was a choice made daily. She found strength in the knowledge that even Elon Musk, a symbol of fearless innovation, had faced setbacks and criticism yet kept pushing forward. As winter melted into spring, Evelyn and Sarah planned a trip together, a weekend getaway to the mountains, a place of peace and renewal. The journey was filled with tentative conversations, shared memories, and the quiet joy of rediscovery. They hiked through trails lined with wildflowers, the air crisp and filled with the scent of pine. At night, by the crackling fire, they talked about hopes, regrets, and dreams. Evelyn felt a deep gratitude for the second chance she had been given, not just to reclaim her own life but to rebuild the family she thought was lost. The trip marked a turning point, a symbolic crossing from isolation to connection. Evelyn knew the road ahead would not always be smooth, but the bridge they were building was strong enough to carry them both. Her story of rekindled connection spread through her blog and community, inspiring others to reach out to loved ones and heal old wounds. Evelyn's life had become a tapestry woven with threads of courage, love, and resilience. Each relationship she nurtured was a testament to the power of human connection and the possibility of renewal at any age. She whispered to herself often, "It's never too late to mend what was broken." As she looked out at the blooming garden outside her window, Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace. The shadows of loneliness had receded, replaced by the warm light of belonging and hope. The journey was far from over, but she faced it with an open heart and a fierce determination to keep moving forward. The spark that Elon Musk had ignited in her was no longer just a flicker, it was a steady flame guiding her through life's uncertainties. Evelyn closed her eyes and smiled, ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Evelyn had always felt that age was a boundary, an invisible line drawn sharply around her life that dictated what she could or couldn't do. For decades, she believed that once you passed a certain point, the world expected you to slow down, to step aside, to fade quietly into the background. But now, fueled by a new fire inside her, she was determined to shatter those barriers. It started with a simple idea, to prove to herself and to others that age was not a limit but a starting point for new achievements. She remembered hearing Elon Musk say in an interview, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Those words echoed in her mind as she embarked on a bold project, a community tech workshop aimed at seniors who felt left behind by the rapid pace of modern technology. Evelyn had seen too many friends and neighbors struggle with devices and apps, retreating further into isolation because they felt lost. She wanted to change that narrative. Organizing the workshop took every ounce of her energy and resolve. She reached out to the local library, community centers, and even a few tech-savvy young volunteers she'd met through her blog. There were skeptics along the way, people who questioned why an older woman would take on such a challenge or doubted the seniors' willingness to learn. But Evelyn ignored the noise. She focused on the possibilities, the faces of those who needed encouragement and support. The first workshop day arrived with a mix of nerves and excitement. The room was filled with chairs, laptops, tablets, and hopeful participants. Many arrived hesitant, unsure if they could keep up or if technology was meant for them anymore. Evelyn greeted each person warmly, sharing her own story of rediscovery and reminding them that it was never too late to learn or to dream. The session began with basic skills, turning on devices, navigating simple apps, sending messages. Slowly, the participants' confidence grew. Laughter filled the room as they fumbled through new commands, asked questions, and celebrated small victories. Evelyn watched with pride as friendships formed, and the energy shifted from fear to empowerment. Over the weeks, the workshops expanded, covering online communication, social media, and even digital photography. Evelyn introduced projects that encouraged creativity and connection, like creating digital photo albums to share with family or starting blogs to tell their stories. The impact was profound. Seniors who once felt invisible were now sharing their voices online, reconnecting with distant relatives, and embracing a new sense of purpose. Evelyn's own confidence soared as she led the group through challenges and breakthroughs. She felt the invisible barriers cracking beneath her feet. But breaking barriers was not without setbacks. There were days when technology failed, when frustration threatened to overwhelm the group. Evelyn herself grappled with self-doubt, wondering if she was overreaching or if her efforts truly made a difference. Yet, every time doubt crept in, she returned to Elon Musk's example, someone who faced countless failures but kept pushing toward his vision with relentless determination. Evelyn realized that breaking barriers required persistence and the willingness to fail forward. One evening, after a particularly challenging session, a woman named Margaret approached Evelyn with tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be able to send an email, let alone start a blog," she said softly. "You've given me a new life." Moments like this fueled Evelyn's resolve. She knew that what she was doing went far beyond teaching technology, it was about restoring dignity, connection, and hope. The workshop began to draw attention beyond their small town. Local news outlets featured Evelyn's story and the transformative power of the program. Invitations arrived to speak at regional conferences about empowering seniors through technology. Evelyn stood before crowds of diverse ages and backgrounds, sharing her journey and urging others to challenge assumptions about aging. She spoke passionately about the importance of inclusion, adaptability, and the courage to embrace change. The response was overwhelming, with many inspired to start similar initiatives in their own communities. Amid the growing success, Evelyn remained grounded in her purpose. She continued painting, writing, and nurturing her personal relationships, knowing that her transformation was holistic. Age had become a badge of honor, a symbol not of limitation but of accumulated wisdom and strength. Her story began to reach people she never imagined, those who had written off their own potential or feared the future because of age. Evelyn became a beacon of hope, a living testament that the boundaries society imposes can be broken with courage and persistence. As she prepared for a keynote speech at a national senior leadership conference, Evelyn reflected on how far she had come. From a place of loneliness and doubt, she had risen to lead, to inspire, and to break barriers not just for herself but for countless others. The journey was ongoing, filled with challenges and triumphs, but Evelyn faced each day with fierce determination and an open heart. Her final words on stage that day echoed through the auditorium: "We are never too old to learn, to grow, or to change." The only limits are the ones we accept. It's time to break those barriers and claim the life we deserve. The standing ovation that followed was not just for her but for every senior ready to step into their power. Evelyn smiled, knowing this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where age was not an end but a thrilling new horizon. Evelyn sat in her sunlit kitchen, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug as a swirl of thoughts raced through her mind. The invitation to speak at the National Senior Leadership Conference had ignited a fire within her, but beneath that excitement was a whisper of fear. What if she wasn't ready? What if the crowd of hundreds, some decades younger, dismissed her as too old or out of touch? For years, Evelyn had lived in the shadows of doubt, letting fear dictate her steps. But this moment felt different. It was a chance to take the leap, to step beyond comfort and into a space that promised growth, challenge, and transformation. She thought about Elon Musk's words again, the mantra she had carried like a talisman: when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. This was her leap of faith. Preparing for the speech consumed her days. She wrote and rewrote, pored over every word, wanting to speak not just from experience but from the heart. She remembered the lonely nights, the silent tears, the moments when giving up seemed easier than trying. She remembered the spark Elon had ignited, the refusal to accept limits, and wove these threads into her message. The night before the conference, Evelyn could hardly sleep. Her mind danced between hope and anxiety, imagining the faces in the audience, the spotlight's glare, the weight of expectation. But she reminded herself that fear was part of the journey, not a sign to retreat. The morning of the speech dawned crisp and clear. As she stood backstage, she felt the hum of energy, the buzz of anticipation from the crowd. Her heart pounded, palms slick with sweat. A deep breath settled her nerves, and she stepped into the light. The auditorium was vast, filled with faces ranging from vibrant youth to seasoned elders, all eager for inspiration. Evelyn began with a question, one she knew would resonate deeply: what if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? The room quieted, curiosity sparking in the audience. She spoke candidly about her own struggles, the loneliness, the regrets, the sense of invisibility that so many seniors feel. She shared the story of how a simple spark, inspired by Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of the impossible, had transformed her life. She spoke of the power of purpose, the courage to face fear, and the beauty of starting anew at any age. Her voice trembled at times, not from weakness but from the raw emotion of truth. As she recounted the journey from isolation to empowerment, the audience leaned in, drawn by the authenticity and hope radiating from her words. She challenged them to rewrite their own stories, to break free from society's limiting expectations, and to embrace the unknown with boldness. Evelyn saw tears glistening in the eyes of some listeners, heard murmurs of agreement and the swell of applause. When she finished, the standing ovation was overwhelming, a chorus of respect and admiration that echoed long after she left the stage. Backstage, Evelyn was met with smiles, handshakes, and heartfelt thanks. Younger attendees expressed surprise and gratitude, saying her story had shattered stereotypes they hadn't even realized they held. Evelyn realized then that her leap of faith was not just a personal victory but a catalyst for change in others. In the days that followed, invitations poured in, to speak at more events, to consult on programs for seniors, and to collaborate with organizations dedicated to lifelong learning and empowerment. Evelyn embraced these opportunities with a mixture of humility and determination, knowing each step extended the reach of her message. But the leap of faith was more than public speaking or recognition. It was a mindset shift. A commitment to act despite fear, to trust in her own value, and to inspire others to do the same. Evelyn continued to nurture her creative passions, relationships, and community work, weaving them into a life rich with meaning and connection. She understood that the leap wasn't a single moment but a continuous process of choosing courage over comfort. One evening, as she sat by her window watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Evelyn reflected on how far she had come. The woman who once doubted her worth and feared the future was now a beacon of hope for others navigating the complex landscape of aging. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, this leap was never about fear, it was about faith in what's possible. With that, Evelyn felt the steady flame within her burn brighter than ever, ready to light the way for the journeys yet to come. Evelyn's life had become a tapestry of reinvention, each thread woven with courage, hope, and a fierce refusal to be defined by age. After the national conference, a new idea took root in her mind, a dream that felt bigger than herself yet deeply personal. Inspired by Elon Musk's vision of building something revolutionary from the ground up, she decided to create a community center dedicated to lifelong learning and creativity for seniors. The idea sparked excitement but also a flood of doubts. Could she really do this? Was it too ambitious, too complicated? Evelyn reminded herself that every great endeavor started with a single step, and she was no stranger to beginning anew. She began by gathering a small team of like-minded volunteers. Fellow seniors who shared her passion for learning and connection, local artists, educators, and a few young people eager to bridge generations. Together, they mapped out a plan for the center, a place where seniors could explore new skills, from digital literacy to painting and woodworking, where they could share stories, build friendships, and rediscover their purpose. The first hurdle was finding a suitable space. After weeks of calls and visits, they secured a modest building in the heart of town, an old storefront with large windows that let in warm sunlight and a faded charm that begged for renewal. Evelyn saw beyond the peeling paint and creaky floors to the possibilities within. Renovations began, a community effort fueled by donated materials and volunteer labor. As they worked, Evelyn felt a sense of belonging and pride she hadn't experienced in years. The project became a rallying point, drawing in people who believed in second chances and the power of collective dreams. Alongside physical rebuilding, Evelyn and her team developed programs tailored to the diverse interests and needs of their peers. Workshops on technology and social media, art classes that encouraged self-expression, health and wellness seminars, and storytelling circles where voices long unheard could finally be shared. Evelyn's blog chronicled the journey, capturing both the triumphs and challenges with honesty and humor. One chilly morning, as the first flakes of winter dusted the streets, the center officially opened its doors. The inaugural event was modest but heartfelt. Neighbors, friends, and curious newcomers filled the room, their faces glowing with anticipation. Evelyn stood at the podium, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves. She shared the story behind the center's creation, the spark that started it all, the hurdles overcome, and the vision for a community where age was celebrated as a gateway to growth. Applause filled the space, but more than that, Evelyn sensed a collective breath of hope, a shared belief in what could be. In the weeks that followed, the center thrived. Classes filled quickly, laughter echoed through the halls, and connections blossomed. Evelyn watched as her peers discovered talents they'd long forgotten, as friendships forged in the fires of reinvention grew stronger. The center was more than a building, it was a sanctuary, a launchpad, a home. Evelyn felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The dream she had nurtured was no longer just hers, it belonged to the community, a living testament to the power of daring to dream again. Yet, challenges persisted. Funding was always a concern, and Evelyn found herself navigating grant applications, fundraising events, and the delicate dance of balancing passion with practicalities. There were moments of exhaustion and doubt, times when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. But every time those feelings threatened to pull her down, she thought of Elon Musk's persistence through failures and setbacks. She reminded herself that resilience was not about never falling but rising each time stronger. The center's impact extended beyond the seniors it served. Local schools invited Evelyn and her team to collaborate on intergenerational programs, bringing together children and elders in creative and meaningful ways. These partnerships sparked new energy, breaking down barriers of age and fostering mutual respect and understanding. Evelyn watched with joy as her dream grew in unexpected directions, a ripple effect touching lives far beyond what she had imagined. One afternoon, as she led a painting class, a young volunteer asked Evelyn what kept her going when the journey got hard. Evelyn smiled, brush in hand, and replied, "It's the belief that life doesn't end with age, it evolves. Every day holds the chance to build something new, to inspire, to connect. That's a dream worth chasing." As spring blossomed outside, Evelyn stood on the center's porch, watching a group of seniors laughing and sharing stories. The warmth in her chest was undeniable. She had broken free from the confines of fear and limitation to build a legacy of hope and transformation. Her journey was proof that it was never too late to dream, to create, and to make a difference. Evelyn whispered to the breeze, "This is just the beginning." Evelyn never imagined that her journey would bring her face to face with someone like Marcus, a retired engineer in his 70s with a sharp mind and an irrepressible curiosity. She met him one chilly afternoon at the community center, where he'd come to volunteer after hearing about the program she'd started. Marcus carried with him the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades solving problems and building things, yet he also bore the marks of his own struggles with aging. The creeping sense of irrelevance and the challenge of finding new purpose. Their first conversation was tentative, each sizing up the other's story. Evelyn shared how she'd reinvented her life after years of feeling invisible, and Marcus spoke of his longing to apply his skills in meaningful ways again. It didn't take long before their mutual respect grew into something more, a partnership fueled by shared vision and complementary talents. Marcus brought a technical expertise that perfectly complemented Evelyn's creativity and leadership. Together, they dreamed bigger, not just a community center but a hub for innovation where seniors could design, build, and launch projects that mattered. They envisioned workshops teaching robotics, coding, and 3D printing, fields often seen as the domain of the young. Marcus introduced Evelyn to a network of former colleagues and local tech enthusiasts willing to volunteer and mentor. The initial excitement was tempered by practical challenges. Funding, space, and skepticism from some community members who doubted seniors could master such complex skills. But Evelyn and Marcus pushed forward, embodying the very spirit of Elon Musk's fearless pursuit of the unknown. One evening, while working late on a grant proposal, Marcus confided in Evelyn about his fears. "I'm not sure we're the right people for this. What if we fail? What if no one shows up?" Evelyn smiled, recalling the countless moments she'd faced similar doubts. "Marcus, the only failure is never trying. We're here because we believe it's possible. That's enough to start." The grant was awarded, a turning point that breathed new life into their plans. They transformed a corner of the community center into a mini makerspace, stocked with tools and technology donated by supporters. The first robotics class was a modest affair, just a handful of seniors testing their skills, fumbling with wires and code. But the enthusiasm was contagious. Word spread quickly, and soon the makerspace buzzed with activity. Seniors who had never dreamed of programming a robot were now collaborating, learning, and celebrating breakthroughs. Evelyn watched with pride as Marcus mentored the group, his passion rekindled and his confidence restored. Their success stories multiplied. Projects that solved everyday problems, like automated garden watering systems or easy-to-use communication devices for those with disabilities. Each innovation was a victory against the stereotype that aging meant decline. Evelyn and Marcus's partnership deepened beyond the center. They shared long walks discussing philosophy, dreams, and the meaning of purpose in the later chapters of life. Marcus often joked that Evelyn was the Elon Musk of their town, sparking revolutions in unexpected places. One afternoon, during a community showcase, Evelyn introduced Marcus to the audience as her unexpected mentor. She recounted how his wisdom and courage had transformed not just the center but her own understanding of collaboration and resilience. The crowd erupted in applause, many moved by the story of two seniors redefining what was possible. Evelyn realized that mentorship was a two-way street, that even as she inspired others, she was continuously learning and growing. Marcus's guidance reminded her that age brought not just challenges but a wealth of knowledge and experience to draw upon. Together, they planned future expansions, virtual reality classes, partnerships with local universities, and outreach to isolated seniors who couldn't visit the center. The possibilities seemed endless. Yet, even amid the success, Evelyn stayed humble. She knew the journey was ongoing, filled with new obstacles and opportunities. The fire Elon Musk had ignited within her burned steady, a reminder that transformation was a lifelong pursuit. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn and Marcus sat on the center's porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. Evelyn felt a profound gratitude, for the unexpected mentor who had joined her on this path, for the community that had embraced change, and for the future still waiting to be written. She squeezed Marcus's hand and whispered, "This is more than I ever imagined." Marcus smiled, eyes twinkling with promise. "And it's only the beginning." Evelyn's days were filled with light and purpose, but beneath that brightness lurked shadows she could no longer ignore. Aging was not a journey without pain, and now, at 72, she felt the weight of her own physical decline creeping in, a stubborn stiffness in her joints, the occasional breathlessness, and nights when sleep evaded her. The community center thrived, her partnerships flourished, and the laughter of new friends filled the halls, yet in the quiet moments alone, Evelyn confronted fears she had long pushed aside. One afternoon, after a busy workshop, she sat in the empty room, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Her body ached more than usual, and a wave of fatigue washed over her. She closed her eyes, trying to will away the discomfort, but the truth was undeniable, her health was changing, and she had to face it. That evening, she sat down with her doctor, a gentleman named Dr. Ramirez, who had cared for her over the years. The news was sobering: arthritis was progressing, and while manageable, it would require adjustments in her lifestyle and expectations. Evelyn listened quietly, the familiar fear of limitation creeping back. "You need to slow down, Evelyn," Dr. Ramirez advised kindly. "It's important to balance activity with rest." The words felt like a challenge, almost a betrayal of the momentum she had fought so hard to build. Back home, Evelyn wrestled with the tension between pushing forward and honoring her body's signals. Was she being reckless? Was this the moment to surrender? The old voice of doubt whispered cruelly, "You're too old for this. Maybe it's time to accept the end." But then, in the quiet of the night, she recalled a quote from Elon Musk that had guided her through darker days: "Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up." Evelyn realized that facing her shadows didn't mean giving up, it meant adapting, finding new ways to persevere. She reached out to Marcus, who listened with empathy and shared his own struggles with aging and health. Together, they explored adjustments to the center's programs, incorporating more gentle activities like chair yoga, mindfulness meditation, and nutrition workshops. Evelyn began attending physical therapy sessions, learning exercises to maintain mobility and reduce pain. The process was humbling and frustrating at times, but it also opened doors to deeper self-awareness and compassion. One morning, as she practiced a slow stretch by the window, Evelyn noticed a group of seniors gathered for a new mindfulness class she had introduced. Their faces were peaceful, their breathing steady. She realized that embracing vulnerability and limits did not diminish her strength, it expanded it. The center became a place where the realities of aging were acknowledged alongside the celebration of growth. Evelyn invited guest speakers, gerontologists, counselors, and wellness experts, to share insights and support. The community found comfort in honest conversations about fear, loss, and resilience. Evelyn's blog took on a new tone, blending stories of triumph with candid reflections on the challenges of aging. Her readers responded with gratitude and openness, creating a dialogue that lifted the stigma of decline and emphasized dignity and hope. Yet, even as she adapted, Evelyn encountered resistance, from within and without. Some friends urged her to take it easy or questioned why she continued to push so hard. Occasionally, she faced internal battles with frustration and impatience when her body refused to keep pace with her ambitions. But each setback was met with a renewed commitment to balance, honoring her limits without surrendering her dreams. One poignant moment came during a community event when a woman approached Evelyn, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing us that it's okay to be strong and vulnerable at the same time," she said softly. "You're teaching us all how to face our shadows." Evelyn realized then that her willingness to confront her own struggles had become a beacon for others navigating similar paths. Her story was no longer just about breaking barriers but also about embracing the whole truth of aging, the light and the shadows intertwined. Late one night, Evelyn sat by the fireplace, journaling her thoughts. She wrote, "I am learning that courage is not the absence of fear or pain, but the choice to move forward in spite of them. My journey is not perfect, but it is mine, full of setbacks, growth, and unyielding hope." The fire crackled softly, warming the room as Evelyn closed her journal with a sense of peace. She understood that facing the shadows was part of her evolution, a necessary chapter in the story she was still writing. With renewed clarity, she looked ahead, ready to continue her work, not in denial of aging, but in harmony with it. The spark that Elon Musk had ignited within her burned steady, a reminder that the greatest transformations often come from embracing the whole of life, light and shadow together. Evelyn hadn't spoken to her daughter, Claire, in nearly 5 years. The silence between them was thick with regret and unspoken pain, a gulf widened by years of misunderstandings, harsh words, and distance. Yet beneath the surface of that silence was a yearning, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way back. The community center had brought Evelyn new purpose and connections, but the ache for family remained a quiet companion. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of reconciliation and innovation, Evelyn decided it was time to reach out, to bridge the divide that had left her feeling isolated. It started with a letter, handwritten and tentative, carefully chosen words conveying apology, love, and the hope for a fresh start. She wasn't sure if Claire would respond, or if the wounds were too deep to heal. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's heart wrestled with anticipation and fear. When a reply finally arrived, simple but warm, it was like the first light of dawn after a long night. They arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe in town, a neutral place where both could feel safe. The first moments were awkward, glances exchanged, tentative smiles, the weight of years hanging in the air. But as they talked, memories surfaced, childhood laughter, shared dreams, the love that had never truly disappeared. Claire confessed her own struggles with feeling overlooked and misunderstood, and Evelyn shared her fears of being too late to mend what was broken. Tears flowed freely, but so did understanding and forgiveness. Over the following months, they took small steps to rebuild their relationship, a weekly phone call, shared meals, visits to the community center where Claire began volunteering. Evelyn introduced her daughter to the world she'd created, the space where age was no barrier and dreams were reborn. Watching Claire interact with the seniors, Evelyn saw a new light in her eyes, a rekindled respect and admiration. Their bond deepened, healing not just their relationship but also Evelyn's own sense of worth and belonging. It wasn't always easy. Old patterns and resentments occasionally resurfaced, but they faced them with honesty and patience. Evelyn learned to listen without judgment, and Claire learned to express her feelings openly. Together, they forged a new narrative, one of resilience, love, and hope. Evelyn's story became a testament to the power of forgiveness and the courage to seek connection even when it feels daunting. The community center hosted events celebrating family and reconciliation, where Evelyn and Claire shared their journey to inspire others. Their story resonated deeply, sparking conversations about healing fractured relationships and embracing the possibility of new beginnings at any age. One evening, as Evelyn and Claire walked home from the center, the setting sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk. Evelyn squeezed her daughter's hand and said softly, "I was afraid it was too late, but now I know it's never too late to heal." Claire smiled, tears glistening. "Thank you for reaching out. You gave me a second chance, and so did I." Evelyn reflected on how Elon Musk's fearless example of challenging the impossible had given her the courage to face her own fears, to take a leap into vulnerability and love. The journey had not only transformed her life but also restored a precious bond she thought was lost forever. As they turned toward home, Evelyn felt a profound peace settle in her heart. The past was not forgotten, but it no longer held her captive. She was free to build a future filled with connection, purpose, and grace. In that moment, she understood deeply that true transformation often begins by reaching across the divide and daring to say, "I'm sorry. I want to try again." The spark Elon had ignited within her continued to burn bright, a beacon guiding her toward love, healing, and endless possibilities. Evelyn's world had expanded beyond anything she could have imagined. The community center thrived, her bond with Claire was healing, and the makerspace buzzed with creativity and purpose. Yet, true to Elon Musk's spirit of relentless challenge and pushing boundaries, Evelyn felt a stirring inside her, a call to take on something new, something bold. The idea came unexpectedly one crisp autumn morning as she read an article about climate change and the urgent need for sustainable solutions. The thought struck her with clarity: what if the community center could become a model for green living and innovation? A place where seniors not only learned new skills but also contributed to environmental solutions that mattered. The concept ignited her imagination. She shared it with Marcus, who immediately saw the potential. Together, they envisioned solar panels powering the center, workshops on renewable energy, and community gardens that promoted local food production. They dreamed of transforming their space into a beacon of sustainability and hope, inspiring other towns to follow. The challenge was immense. Funding would be tight, technology complex, and the skepticism from some community members strong. Yet, Evelyn embraced the challenge with the same determination that had fueled every step of her journey. She began researching grants and partnerships, reaching out to environmental organizations and local businesses. She invited experts to speak and organized workshops that introduced seniors to the basics of sustainability, from composting to energy conservation. The center's garden blossomed, tended by volunteers who found joy and purpose in nurturing life from the earth. Evelyn's blog chronicled the evolution, capturing stories of transformation, both of the environment and the people engaged in its care. Her readers responded with enthusiasm and support, sharing their own ideas and successes. One memorable day, a local journalist visited the center to cover the Green Initiative. The resulting article highlighted how a group of seniors was defying stereotypes by leading a movement toward sustainability, blending wisdom with innovation. The exposure brought new supporters and donors, easing some of the financial burdens. Yet, the work was not without setbacks. Technical glitches delayed the installation of solar panels, harsh weather threatened the garden's progress, and some volunteers struggled to adapt to the new focus. Evelyn faced moments of frustration and doubt but remembered Musk's words: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." She rallied her team with honesty and optimism, reminding them that progress was rarely linear and that every obstacle was an opportunity to learn and grow. The transformation extended beyond the center's physical space. Conversations deepened around the connection between aging, purpose, and environmental stewardship. Seniors found renewed meaning in contributing to a cause greater than themselves, and the community as a whole began to shift its mindset toward intergenerational responsibility. Evelyn's relationship with Claire also blossomed in this new chapter. Claire, inspired by her mother's vision, brought her skills in social media marketing to help promote the Green Initiative, connecting the center's story with a broader audience. Their collaboration strengthened their bond, blending personal healing with shared purpose. As winter approached, the solar panels finally went live, bathing the center in clean energy and reducing costs. The garden yielded its first harvest, shared among volunteers and donated to local food banks. Evelyn stood outside one crisp morning, watching the sunlight glint off the panels, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. The challenge had been daunting, but the results were tangible, proof that transformation at any age was possible and powerful. That evening, Evelyn wrote in her journal, "The greatest challenge is often the one we give ourselves permission to embrace. Age is not a barrier but a bridge to new possibilities. We are never too old to change the world." The spark Elon Musk had ignited within her continued to fuel a fire of hope and action. Evelyn knew the journey was far from over, but with every new challenge, she grew stronger, wiser, and more determined. Her story was no longer just about personal reinvention but about inspiring a community to dream bigger, act bolder, and live with purpose, regardless of age. And in that truth, Evelyn found endless joy. Evelyn never set out to be famous. She only wanted to feel useful again, to matter, to rebuild her sense of self after decades of being underestimated, dismissed, or forgotten. Yet now, as she sat on a panel in front of a live television audience, lights glaring and cameras whirring, she realized just how far her story had traveled. The invitation had come in an unexpected email from a well-known national talk show. They'd read about the Sustainable Community Center started and run by seniors, led by a woman who had reinvented herself in her 70s. The producer called Evelyn's journey Unshakably American, a story of second chances, grit, and purpose reborn. Evelyn hesitated at first. What did she know about television? What if she stumbled? But then she remembered a quote she'd jotted down from Elon Musk's biography months earlier: "Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster." Staying silent wasn't an option anymore. The night before the interview, Claire helped her pick out a soft blue blazer. "You're going to do great, Mom," she said. "You've already inspired hundreds of people. Now the world just gets to see what I've always known." Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as the interview began, but the host's warmth and the audience's genuine curiosity helped ease her nerves. She spoke about the feeling of being invisible after 65, about the creeping doubt that she had anything left to give. She talked about the moment Elon Musk's fearless defiance sparked something in her, how his belief in building a future against impossible odds reminded her that age wasn't the enemy. Fear was. "I didn't become someone new," she told the audience. "I finally gave myself permission to become who I had always been." When they played a short video clip of the community center, seniors tending the garden, building solar kits, learning to code, the crowd erupted in applause. Evelyn blinked back tears. In the crowd, she spotted Claire, her face lit up with pride. After the show aired, everything changed. Evelyn's inbox exploded with messages from across the country, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, who had seen the interview and felt something shift inside themselves. "I thought it was too late for me," wrote one man from Kansas. "But now I'm looking into volunteering at my library. I just enrolled in an online class," wrote a woman from Maine. "I was scared before. You made me believe I'm still allowed to grow." It was overwhelming at first, the recognition, the sudden spotlight. Reporters called. Podcasts invited her to speak. Foundations asked her to consult. But Evelyn stayed grounded. She still started every morning with a walk, every week with a check-in with Marcus and the center's team. The work hadn't changed, only the reach had. Marcus, ever her steady friend and co-visionary, grinned when a news van pulled up outside the center one morning. "Well, look at us," he said. "Elon Musk would be proud." Evelyn chuckled. "He'd probably tell us we're moving too slowly." They both laughed. But there was a new responsibility now, not just to their town, but to the wider world paying attention. Evelyn wanted to ensure the center's story didn't become a one-time feature, a novelty clip about inspirational seniors. She wanted it to be a movement. She and Marcus began developing a toolkit, resources for other communities to start similar centers, powered by older adults with untapped brilliance. They recorded tutorials, held virtual Q&As, and created a digital mentorship program that connected seniors with others just beginning to ask, "What if there's more?" A national nonprofit soon partnered with them, offering grant support and a platform to scale. Evelyn's voice grew clearer, stronger. She no longer stumbled over the idea of being a leader. She owned it. At one of the new partner sites in Oregon, an 81-year-old woman named Beatrice started a woodworking class using Marcus's curriculum. In Georgia, a 70-year-old former trucker organized a senior-led tech literacy group. Evelyn watched the ripple effect unfold with awe and humility. One day, while writing a blog post, she paused to reflect. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she thought back to the lonely woman staring out her kitchen window not so long ago. That woman had felt invisible. Tired. Done. And yet here she was, older, yes. But more alive than ever. Nobody believed in me after 65, she typed slowly, but I stopped waiting for permission. And the moment I did, the world started paying attention. That line struck something in her. She made it the title of a new series of talks she'd started giving across the country, visiting community centers, retirement homes, universities, anywhere she could speak truth into the hearts of those who felt forgotten. The talks were raw and real. She didn't hide the aches, the mistakes, or the moments of fear. She wove them into the story because they were part of the truth. And truth, she'd learned, was what made people lean in. Claire traveled with her to some events, watching her mother speak with confidence, humor, and wisdom. After one especially moving event in Chicago, Claire turned to Evelyn backstage and said, "You didn't just change your life. You started something bigger than both of us." Evelyn took her daughter's hand, eyes misty. "I just followed a spark. You're the ones fanning it into something more." That night, back in her hotel room, Evelyn found herself scrolling through one of Elon Musk's old interviews. In it, he said, "The first step is to establish that something is possible, then probability will occur." She smiled. It had once felt impossible to be seen, to matter, to lead. But now, not only was it possible, it was happening. Not just to her, but to countless others following her lead. And she wasn't done yet. It happened just as things were reaching a new high. Evelyn had returned from giving a keynote speech at a statewide conference on senior innovation, where she had received a standing ovation and even a handshake from the governor. The momentum was dizzying. Requests flooded in. A national magazine wanted to run a feature story. A documentary filmmaker had reached out. And then, everything stopped. She was walking through the community center's garden on a breezy afternoon when the sharp pain hit her chest. It wasn't the kind that made her keel over, but it was deep and wrong and unfamiliar. She sat down on the nearest bench, willing herself to breathe steadily. She told herself it was nothing. Probably stress. Probably fatigue. She'd been on the go non-stop, barely sleeping, barely eating, caught in the whirlwind of this new, incredible chapter of life. But that night, the pain returned, stronger, longer. Claire insisted they go to the hospital. Tests. Monitors. Anxious waiting. The diagnosis, angina, likely stress-induced, but serious. A warning. Not a full heart attack, but a siren call from her body to slow down, now. The doctor was firm. "You've done something extraordinary. But if you want to keep going, you're going to have to recenter. Change the pace. Honor what your body's telling you." Evelyn nodded numbly, listening as Claire squeezed her hand. She could feel the concern in her daughter's grip, the tightness in her own chest no longer just physical. She was scared. Not of dying, exactly, but of losing everything she'd built. The rhythm. The energy. The movement. Was this how it ended? With hospital beeps and medications and warnings taped to her fridge. After a few days of observation, they released her. Claire brought her home and, for the first time in months, Evelyn sat still. Not resting between meetings. Not thinking about the next event. Just, sitting. Watching the wind stir the trees. Listening to the quiet hum of life beyond deadlines and spotlights. It was uncomfortable. Her mind raced. She worried about the center. About the people depending on her. About the programs in motion. Would things unravel without her hand on the wheel? But the days passed, and something unexpected happened. They didn't. Marcus stepped in with grace and precision, rallying the team to keep things moving. Claire checked on operations daily, updating Evelyn with cheerful reports. Volunteers rose to the occasion, their energy surging to protect what they had all built together. For the first time, Evelyn truly saw what she had created, not just a center, but a community. Not just a movement, but a legacy. And it didn't depend on her alone. One afternoon, she sat on her porch, blanket over her legs, sipping tea, when Marcus dropped by. He didn't say much at first, just sat beside her and looked out at the fading autumn colors. After a while, he said, "You know, it's funny. I think you taught us all something without meaning to." Evelyn turned her head slightly. "What's that?" "How to lead by letting go," he said. "You showed us how to dream, and now, we're showing you how to carry it." She swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. "I didn't want it to end like this," she said softly. "It's not ending," he replied. "It's evolving. Like you." That night, Evelyn opened her journal again. For days, it had sat blank, the pages untouched, as if writing would make everything too real. But now, she wrote slowly, carefully, "I thought movement was strength. But maybe stillness has its power too. Maybe slowing down doesn't mean stopping. It means letting the things you've planted grow, even when your hands aren't in the soil." She still worried. That never completely went away. But she began to see this forced pause not as punishment, but as an invitation. To reflect. To recalibrate. To remember why she'd started any of it in the first place. In the stillness, clarity came. She remembered Elon Musk talking once about failure, how he'd faced bankruptcy, public ridicule, rockets exploding. And kept moving anyway, but not recklessly. Strategically. Patiently. Intentionally. "Sometimes you need to step back to see the whole system," he'd said. "Zoom out. Reassess. Fix what needs fixing." Evelyn wasn't a rocket engineer. But she was a builder. A leader. A woman who had defied her own expectations. And this setback, as frightening as it was, didn't erase her progress. It simply asked her to shift. She began recording audio reflections, short, heartfelt messages about aging, healing, purpose, that Claire uploaded weekly for their growing online community. They called it Silver Sparks, and people loved it. Her voice reached more people now than ever before, not in a stage-lit hall, but in kitchens, cars, and quiet living rooms across the country. Slowly, she resumed gentle visits to the center. Just an hour at first. Then 2. Always with rest between. Always with intention. And every time she returned, she saw more clearly the seeds she'd sown blooming in others. A soft-spoken man who used to sit quietly in the corner was now leading an art class. A former school teacher had taken over mentorship duties. The center was alive, not in spite of her absence, but because of her influence. One day, as she walked past the garden, now lightly dusted in frost, she saw someone had placed a small hand-painted sign in the soil, "We grow because you believed." Evelyn stopped, breath catching in her throat. That was it. That was everything. The journey wasn't about doing it all. It was about starting something that could outlast her. And now, with every heartbeat reminding her of life's preciousness, she understood her next role, not as the engine, but as the soul. Not pushing forward, but lifting others to do so. The fire that had been sparked by Elon Musk's fearless example still burned. But it no longer needed to roar. It glowed now, steady, warm, enduring. The air inside the community center felt different now, not quieter or slower, but fuller, like something long planted had come into bloom. Evelyn walked through the halls more slowly these days, but every step felt grounded in grace. The place didn't need her the way it once had. And strangely, beautifully, that didn't make her feel less important. It made her feel complete. She still attended a few meetings, spoke at small gatherings, and recorded her Silver Sparks audio reflections each week. But more often, she was in listening mode. Sitting on the side of the room, hearing others pitch ideas, offer solutions, and carry the mission forward. They didn't ask for her approval anymore. They didn't need her to steer. And that was exactly how she wanted it. One afternoon, she found herself sitting across from Lydia, a 67-year-old former social worker who had joined the center only 6 months prior but had quickly become one of its most active members. Lydia was smart, driven, and had the kind of no-nonsense charm that Evelyn instantly liked. They were sipping tea in the garden, the last of the autumn leaves drifting down like amber confetti, when Lydia hesitantly asked the question Evelyn had seen coming. "Have you thought about who might take over for you long-term?" Evelyn smiled gently. "I think I have," she said. Lydia looked surprised, then honored, then nervous. Evelyn reached across the table and placed a hand over hers. "You don't have to be me. You just have to care. And you already do." It wasn't an official appointment, not yet, but it was the beginning of a new phase. Evelyn spent the next few weeks mentoring Lydia more closely. They talked strategy, legacy, operations, and most importantly, values. "The heart of this place isn't innovation," Evelyn said one day as they sat in the sun-drenched library corner. "It's dignity. Everyone who walks through that door wants to know they're still worth something. That they still have something to give." Lydia nodded. "I've felt that myself," she said quietly. "When I retired, I felt like I'd been erased. Like everything I'd ever built just ended." Evelyn reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "That's why we're here. To remind people that endings can be beginnings in disguise." Together, they started planning the center's future, expanding online learning, deepening intergenerational programs, and strengthening partnerships across the state. Evelyn watched with joy as Lydia took the lead in more meetings, her confidence growing, her vision blooming. And with every step Lydia took forward, Evelyn took one step back, not out of obligation, but out of trust. One morning, Evelyn and Marcus sat in their usual spot by the window. Marcus looked over his glasses and said, "You know, I think you've done it." "Done what?" she asked. "The impossible. You made people believe again, in themselves, in each other, in the idea that age isn't an end." Evelyn looked down, almost shyly. "I just followed the spark." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And now you're passing it on." She smiled, remembering something Elon Musk had once said in an interview, years ago, "My motivation comes from the idea of making a difference, pushing humanity forward, even just a little." That was all she'd ever wanted. Not to be a hero. Not to be remembered in books. But to move the needle. To light a fire. To show others that a life past 65 still had room to be bold. To love. To create. To begin again. As the center prepared for its annual showcase, a celebration of innovation, creativity, and renewal, Evelyn stepped back from organizing. Lydia and her new team took charge, planning every detail with precision and care. Evelyn offered only support when asked, marveling at how the culture she'd helped create was now living and breathing on its own. On the night of the showcase, the community center glowed with lights, laughter, and music. Guests arrived from across the state. Students partnered with seniors on engineering projects. The garden, now dormant for the season, was wrapped in soft lights, a symbol of growth and rest. Evelyn sat in the front row, Claire beside her, watching with quiet pride. When Lydia took the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. She spoke with clarity, humor, and conviction. She honored Evelyn, not with grand gestures, but with a simple sentence that made Evelyn's heart swell, because one woman dared to believe that her story wasn't over, all of this exists. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Evelyn didn't try to hold back the tears. She didn't need to. Claire leaned in and whispered, "She's ready." Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "I know." After the event, Lydia found Evelyn in the garden, away from the noise and celebration. They stood together in silence for a moment, the crisp air wrapping around them like a shawl. You've given me everything I need, Lydia said. Evelyn smiled. And now, you'll give it to others. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden token. It was smooth and circular, engraved with 2 words, "Keep building." I had this made when we opened the makerspace, she explained. I never knew who I was saving it for. But now I do. Lydia took it with reverence, her eyes glassy. Thank you, she whispered. Evelyn hugged her, fiercely and without words. Later that night, Evelyn sat on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars emerge. She thought about her first walk after the Elon Musk quote lit that long-dormant part of her soul. She thought about the garage projects, the aching knees, the awkward first video post. She thought about the garden, Marcus, Claire, the tears and breakthroughs, the failures and fire. And she smiled. She wasn't done, not really. But she didn't need to hold the torch anymore. She had lit enough flames to keep the light alive. That spark, once so small and fragile, had become a wildfire of renewal, not only in her, but in the lives she'd touched. And as she looked up at the stars, she whispered, almost like a prayer, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Whether she meant God, the universe, or Elon Musk himself, she wasn't sure. Maybe all 3. What she did know, with bone-deep certainty, was this: the story had never been about endings. It had always been about beginning again. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains of Evelyn's home, casting long golden rays across the hardwood floor. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea, breathing in the quiet. It was a different kind of silence now. Not the heavy emptiness she'd once known, but a stillness rooted in fulfillment. There was no need to rush. No need to prove. The days moved slower now, and she allowed them to. Outside, the neighborhood stirred awake. A boy on a skateboard zipped past the porch. A couple walked their dog. In the distance, church bells chimed faintly. Life was happening, and she was still part of it, not in the frantic way of before, but in a deeper rhythm. Her calendar, once packed with interviews, keynote addresses, and planning sessions, now had wide, open spaces. Time for reflection. For writing. For quiet walks. For watching the wind in the trees. The community center, under Lydia's steady leadership, was thriving. New programs had sprouted, one focused on intergenerational environmental design, another bringing local students to learn woodworking and robotics from elder mentors. The garden had expanded, with raised beds named after founding members. Evelyn's bore a plaque that simply read, "She believed again." She still visited once or twice a week, not as a leader, but as part of the fabric. People greeted her with warmth, not reverence. And she loved that. The work was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone now. One afternoon, as she watched a group of seniors lead a workshop on 3D printing for middle schoolers, Evelyn felt something shift in her heart. A fullness. A quiet knowing. Legacy wasn't something you left behind. It was something you seeded while still alive, something you nurtured and let others carry. And what she had built, with a simple step forward at age 70, had become more than a center. It had become a movement. Claire visited often, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just stopping in to sit with her mother in silence. They'd built a rhythm, too, a relationship born not out of obligation, but understanding. One evening, they sat on the back porch watching the stars. "You ever think about what started all of this?" Claire asked. Evelyn chuckled. "A podcast," she said. "A podcast and a quote from Elon Musk." "Yeah." Claire smiled. "What was the quote again?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "When something is important enough, you do it, even if the odds are not in your favor." Claire nodded. "You really did that." Evelyn shrugged. "I didn't build rockets. I just walked around the block. Started small. Then kept going. Claire leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. You didn't just keep going, Mom. You gave people permission to begin. That night, Evelyn wrote one last post for the blog she had once called Late Bloom. She titled the post, The New Legacy. Her fingers moved slowly over the keys. When I started this journey, I thought my life had already peaked. I thought I was too old to matter. Too tired to begin again. Too invisible to be seen. But I was wrong. Aging isn't the closing of a book, it's the start of the final, most courageous chapters. And those chapters can be extraordinary. She continued, I used to think legacy meant leaving something behind. Now I know legacy means living in a way that leaves others lit up. It means handing over the torch with open hands, not closed fists. It means building something that breathes without you. I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again. But the truth is, the permission was always mine to give. So if you're reading this, and you're wondering if your story is over, it's not. You're not done. Not even close. Start small. Say yes. Take one step. Make one change. Open the door. Plant the seed. Make the call. Write the page. Start. She ended the post with a final quote, this one her own, hope is not a luxury of the young. It's the inheritance of the brave. The post went viral within hours. Thousands shared it. Dozens of community centers cited it as a turning point in their own programs. National networks picked it up. But Evelyn didn't check the numbers. She didn't care about the views anymore. She cared about the quiet emails, the handwritten letters from strangers. One from a 76-year-old widow in Wyoming who had just started taking piano lessons. Another from a 68-year-old man who opened a tech tutoring service for seniors in his town. A woman who reconciled with her estranged sister after reading Evelyn's second chapter. The ripple effect went on and on. And Evelyn, from her porch, felt it, not as noise, but as music. One crisp morning, Lydia called. We're putting up a new mural in the makerspace, she said. We wanted to include the faces of everyone who helped start this movement. Evelyn hesitated. Do you need me there for it? Only if you want to be, Lydia replied. It's your legacy, but it's our beginning. Evelyn smiled. Exactly as it should be. She went, of course. But she stood off to the side, watching as children painted beside seniors, their laughter echoing off the walls. She didn't need to be in the center. Her presence was already everywhere, in the ideas, the culture, the heartbeat of the place. That night, back home, she curled up in bed with a journal. On the first page, she wrote, New beginnings don't stop at any age. As long as you're breathing, you're becoming. She didn't know how many more chapters life had for her. But she no longer feared the end. She had lived fully. She had dared to hope. She had mattered. And as she drifted to sleep that night, stars blinking outside the window, Evelyn's heart whispered what she now knew was true, not just for her, but for anyone brave enough to believe. You are never too old to begin. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?